Before we dive in, here's the promise of this mini study guide. We're going to take 7 high-yield Section B concepts that show up in real BCBA exam vignettes and practice thinking and controlling variables so you can answer faster and with more confidence. And if you want exam-style practice with instant explanations, you can try the free full-length mock exam at bcbmockexam.com. When Section B questions feel overwhelming, use a simple routine. First, scan for what's controlling the behavior: MO, SD, reinforcement history, rules, models. Then match the definition before you get distracted by story details. Watch for trap words like rule or model that tempt you into the wrong concept. And finally, choose the answer that fits the function of behavior, not the form of the response. Here's the path for today. We'll start with rules versus direct consequences, B-18. Move into verbal behavior and how to label verbal operants from vignettes, B-19. Then the exam's favorite realism upgrade, multiple control, B-20, followed by how new skills can pop out without direct teaching, B-21. Why some behaviors persist even when the environment changes, B-22. How choice and response allocation follows reinforcement patterns, B-23. And we'll close with the clean distinction between imitation and observational learning, B-24. For rule-governed versus contingency-shaped behavior, your first question is simple. Did the person learn the behavior mainly from a verbal description of contingencies, or mainly from contacting consequences directly? Rule-governed behavior can change quickly even without direct experience, while contingency-shaped behavior is built by real reinforcement or punishment and tends to track changes in outcomes more tightly. In vignettes, rules usually announce themselves with language like told, instructed, policy, or an if-then statement, especially when the person follows it without having contacted the consequence yet. Contingency control shows up when the stem highlights learning after consequences, like kept doing it because it worked, and when behavior shifts as contingencies shift. If the item includes a decision tree vibe, you're essentially labeling the controlling source, rule present or not. And is there a consequence history driving the change? A high-yield exam twist is that rules can override contingencies. Someone may keep responding even when natural reinforcement is weak because the rule reduces contact with the real outcomes. From a programming standpoint, you're often deciding whether to teach rules, arrange contingencies, or combine them. And a common trap is calling every instruction an SD. Rules describe contingencies, while SDs signal availability of reinforcement for a response. To lock it in, think through exam-style examples. Finish homework. Then TV is rule-governed because compliance happens before the outcome is contacted. Following no running at school can be rule-controlled even without immediate consequences. Touching a stove less after getting burned is contingency-shaped because the consequence taught it. And going to work for a paycheck is also contingency-shaped because attendance contacts reinforcement over time. For verbal operants, don't label by how the response looks. Label by function. What antecedent evoked it, and what consequence reinforced it. A fast exam move is to ask, what triggered the speaking, and what payoff maintained it? Because different verbal operants have different controlling variables, even if the words sound similar. A MAND is basically language that gets you something. It's evoked by an MO, want/need, and reinforced by specific consequences that directly benefit the speaker. So if the vignette emphasizes deprivation, desire, or because he wants it, start by checking whether the consequence is the requested item, activity, attention, or escape. A tact is language about what's there. It's evoked by a nonverbal stimulus in the environment, an object, event, sensation, and it's reinforced by generalized reinforcers like praise or attention. So when the stem screams, labeling what they see/hear/experience, and the consequence is social reinforcement rather than getting the item, you're likely in tact territory. Echoic is vocal imitation under verbal SD control. Someone says a sound, and the speaker repeats the same sound with point-to-point correspondence and formal similarity. This is your repeat after me pattern, often used in early speech teaching, and it's typically immediate copying of vocalizations. Intraverbal is the conversational workhorse. A verbal stimulus evokes a response, but the response does not match the stimulus point-to-point. Think fill-ins, Q&A, categories, and conversation chains like twinkle, twinkle, leading to little star, or what color is the sky, leading to blue. Textual and transcription are easy to confuse, so anchor on what's controlling the response. Textual is reading written words aloud, and transcription is writing/spelling what you hear. Both have point-to-point correspondence, but on the BCBA exam, formal similarity is not present when the stimulus and response are in different modalities, e.g., spoken words, written words, and transcription, or written words, spoken words, and textual. If you want a one-glance decision shortcut, sort operants by their control. MO points you toward mand. Nonverbal stimuli point you toward tact. Verbal SD with matching sound points you toward echoic. Verbal stimuli with a different response points you toward intraverbal, and written/spoken control points you toward textual or transcription. Then verify with the consequence and the STEM's key clue. Now let's upgrade realism with multiple control. Most natural language isn't controlled by one clean variable. One response can be influenced by MO, SD, context, and prior verbal stimuli at the same time. On the exam, you'll mainly label whether the vignette shows convergent multiple control, many antecedents pushing the same response, or divergent multiple control, one antecedent branching into many responses. Convergent multiple control looks like multiple cues stacking to produce one response. For example, being thirsty plus seeing water increases the likelihood of saying water. Divergent multiple control is the opposite. One cue, like seeing a dog, can evoke several responses: dog, puppy, so cute, all from the same moment. Why this matters on the exam is that vignettes often blend variables on purpose. Prompts can temporarily take control, so you have to notice whether you're seeing prompt dependency or true transfer of control. And a classic trap is mislabeling a tact as a mand when an MO is present, but the consequence is praise. Remember, you don't get the mand label just because an MO exists. The reinforcement and controlling variables have to match the operant. Emergent relations and generative performance are about efficiency. New behaviors appear without direct teaching because learners derive relations from trained networks. Like if AB and BC are taught, AC can emerge, transitivity. Generative performance is broader. Novel responses are built from existing repertoires, meaning good teaching can produce more total skills than what you directly trained. Stimulus equivalence is the classic derived relations package. Reflexivity, A equals A, symmetry, if AB, then BA, and transitivity, if AB and BC, then AC. In exam stems, your clue is that the learner shows a new relation that was never explicitly trained, so you're watching for untrained but logically connected responding. To promote emergence, look for instructional methods that create rich relational networks. Multiple exemplar instruction builds flexible responding across examples. Matrix training teaches combinations to support recombinative generalization. Equivalence-based instruction teaches a subset of relations so others derive. And relational framing practice strengthens patterns like same/opposite/more than so new relations can be generated without step-by-step teaching. A common test trap is mixing up emergence and generalization. Emergent relations are derived from trained relational networks, often symmetry/transitivity patterns, while generalization is when a trained behavior spreads to similar stimuli, settings, or contexts because key features overlap. If the stem sounds like they taught a few links and the rest appeared, think emergence. If it sounds like same skill shows up with new examples after broad teaching, think generalization. Behavioral momentum is your framework for response persistence under disruption. Behaviors with a strong reinforcement history tend to resist change, kind of like behavioral mass built by reinforcement density. On the exam, disruption is often extinction, distraction, or competing reinforcement, and momentum can explain persistence of both appropriate skills and problem behavior. The exam often asks what you do with momentum. A high-probability request sequence builds compliance by stacking easy, reinforced responses before a hard request. You can also strengthen durability by establishing strong patterns before thinning reinforcement. And you can interpret "it keeps happening even after we change things" as a momentum clue. Recent and dense reinforcement histories often explain why responding continues when reinforcement is reduced or removed. Matching law helps you interpret response allocation under concurrent choices. Responding tends to distribute in proportion to reinforcement across options, so choices like task versus attention, tablet versus reading, or problem behavior versus an appropriate request become predictable rather than random. Intervention logic follows directly. Increase reinforcement for the alternative you want and reduce payoffs for competing responses, and you should see allocation shift accordingly. To close, keep imitation and observational learning distinct. Imitation is immediate copying with point-to-point correspondence after a model, while observational learning is acquiring new behavior by watching others and often performing it later without direct step-by-step teaching. If you can quickly sort vignettes into rules versus contingencies, verbal operants, multiple control, emergence, momentum, matching, and modeling skills, you'll be much faster in Section B. And if you want to practice with exam-style questions and instant explanations, you can start with the free full-length mock exam at bcbmockexam.com.